The police say Anne Widdecombe's killing was a targeted attack. But honestly, that seems somewhat a statement of the obvious at this point, and there were few clues as to why.
We are still working to understand the extent of any planning or preparation and the motivation that sits behind that attack.
Despite a long briefing and the potential implications for other leading politicians, we still have more questions than answers tonight. Rohit will assess what clues the police did give us. Also on News at 10. 2/3 of the money spent on PPE was wasted, says the COVID inquiry report, at a cost of $10 billion. The war in Iran goes on, the price of oil goes up.
We knew what Beckham went through previously against Argentina, and that kind of redemption story of scoring that penalty, his celebration, his pulling the shirt and his face, and yeah, that's one of my favourite England memories.
And Gus, the T-Rex, whose remains just sold for $50 million.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. For such a high-profile killing with so many resources allocated to it and such public concern, police are still being cautious, not to say cagey, about the prime suspect in Anne Widdecombe's death. The head of counter-terrorism did confirm one significant detail. The former Conservative minister turned Reform UK spokesperson was the victim of what was clearly a targeted attack. There had been planning and preparation, but he couldn't say how much, nor would he elaborate on a possible motive. And while counter-terrorism officers are investigating, it has not been declared a terrorist incident at this stage. Separately, it has become clear Miss Widdecombe was broadcasting from her home just 10 minutes before she was attacked there.
He probably thinks, where is this going to end? Let's bring an end to it. Let's bring this to a head. Let's put it to the people.
Sitting behind the desk at her Devon home, Anne Widdecombe granted this interview last Wednesday. It was published today. With her familiar tone, she robustly defends Nigel Farage. But 20 minutes later, she was killed.
Described as the politics of personal destruction.
What police can't say is whether those views formed part of the attacker's motive, but they do believe she was the intended target.
It is clear that this was a targeted attack. We are still working to understand the extent of any planning or preparation and the motivation that sits behind that attack. It is important to remember that this is a murder investigation following a brutal attack on a 78-year-old lady in her own home.
A murder investigation and a terrorism investigation are now running in parallel, and yet there's so much that can't be said with certainty about the death of Anne Widdecombe. How long the attack had been in preparation, whether the suspect had considered targeting other Reform UK figures. 4 days in, this case is the subject of both mystery and misinformation. A house in Rotherham today, the scene of extended searches. What was discovered on digital devices here have helped to shape this investigation. This video shows the suspected killer carrying a long object, setting off on a 270-mile journey on the morning the former MP was killed. Tonight, Britain's Prime Minister-to-be said there's much to do to better protect politicians.
I do think we need now a serious review of MPs' security. I certainly am prepared to do that. I don't think we need to, if you like, take MPs completely away, because that could make matters even worse.
The killing here last week has not yet been declared a terrorist incident, but police are still trying to work out why Anne Widdecombe was killed.
And Rohit is here to talk about all this. Look, I mean, we completely understand that the police got a very difficult job. They always have a difficult job in these circumstances. On the other hand, there are a lot of questions around what happened, why it happened. I didn't feel like we got a lot of answers today. What did you feel?
Well, certainly there are questions for Devon and Cornwall Police now in the light of the last few days. Their initial assessment that this probably wasn't politically motivated. What's also true, though, is that the investigation has moved on significantly since then. The first man released from police custody, a second suspect arrested, then devices found, which led police in a different direction. I think there's an important point to make here. When we talk about potential terrorism and violent extremism, we think of those very clear-cut definitions. We think of the ISIS Pledge of Allegiance. We think of the IRA coded warning. Reality is now that so many of the violent extremists who the authorities deal with have a sort of mixture of ideologies, a sort of unclear definition of their violent extremism. And one of the places that this investigation is looking is pretty focused on, actually, is whether the suspect here fits that particular definition.
OK, sounds very interesting. Thank you very much indeed. Now, perhaps it did need an inquiry, but all the signs about taxpayers' money being wasted on PPE, personal protective equipment, at the start of the pandemic were there. Today, the scale of it was spelt out by the latest volume of the COVID inquiry report. 2/3 of the money spent on PPE was wasted, nearly £10 billion. And the VIP lane, exploited by contacts of ministers, should never have been set up, the inquiry chair said. It certainly should not be repeated.
In the darkest days of the pandemic, those on the front line desperately needed protection from a deadly disease. Some staff treating patients dying of COVID had to resort to wearing bin bags and shower caps. Now a report has found government failures left them without vital equipment, while billions of pounds of public money were wasted.
In the global battle to procure equipment and supplies, the UK was simply not ready to compete. The UK entered the pandemic with inadequate and untested plans, and the bodies responsible were caught off guard.
Today's report says the UK's stockpiles of personal protective equipment were in a perilous state. Systemic flaws left doctors, nurses and care staff without the PPE they needed to protect themselves or those in their care. The so-called VIP lane for suppliers was misguided and undermined public trust. And of the almost £15 billion spent on PPE, nearly 2/3, almost £10 billion, was wasted. Christina Fulop was 94 when she died of COVID. Because she was so vulnerable, she only had contact with her care workers.
These care workers were doing 8-hour shifts, going from one elderly frail person to another, wearing the thin medical mask. So you can imagine they get wet, they start disintegrating. So I felt like my mum was a sitting duck.
Do you blame the lack of PPE for your mum's death?
I do. I blame the government's total lack of preparation.
The report does not include evidence on the PPE firm linked to the former Conservative peer, Baroness Michelle Mone. A criminal investigation is ongoing. Lady Mone and her husband deny any wrongdoing.
The report sets out 11 recommendations so the UK can better prepare for future pandemics. They include radically overhauling supply and distribution systems, improving stockpiles and transparency. Baroness Hallett acknowledges it will require investment, but says it's a small price to pay that will ultimately save lives.
The Royal College of Nursing says today's report is a damning indictment of how badly nurses were let down, warning that there will be another pandemic and the government must prepare now. Rebecca Barry, News at 10.
The holding agreement between the United States and Iran that has kept both sides roughly on track towards peace and kept oil prices down looks tonight to be on its last legs. Overnight and this morning, US bombs and missiles hit Iranian targets. Iran retaliated by firing at America's Gulf allies and shipping. 24 hours after President Trump told the world he would impose his own fee on any ships travelling through the Strait of Hormuz, today he said he was, in fact, dropping the whole plan after all. He has, in the last hour or so, though, reimposed a blockade on Iranian ports in response to increased attacks by Iran on ships passing through the strait. All that has had a fairly immediate impact, as you might imagine, on the global oil price. It had fallen significantly since President Trump agreed a ceasefire with Tehran. But over the last 2 weeks, it's jumped by over 20%. Really terrible news for all of us facing ever-increasing bills. And Emma is here. You've just come back from Iran, so I'm very intrigued to hear what you think of where we are tonight. We're back to asking you this question practically every night, but let's put that to one side. Here we are, we're back into it. Where do you think it's going?
Well, if you take the Iranian view, which I heard on a number of occasions from a number of different senior figures last week, the view is that there is a very likely return to war. And I don't think from the Iranian side there is, within parts of the government, any great hesitation to do that. I think there is an acceptance that they have the strength, they still have the capacity, and they have the will, if this is the way it's going to carry on. Tonight we have seen the Americans, for a fourth consecutive night, begin strikes again on the south of the country. That's the area around the Strait of Hormuz, and this is seen as a way to try and stop the Iranians hitting ships that are passing through. Fundamentally, this is all based on this memorandum of understanding, or as a colleague described it the other day, a memorandum of misunderstanding, because that gave 60 days to get this strait open, and we're almost 30 days into it now. The Iranians have read it as this is theirs to control. The Americans have read it as the Iranians can do their bit, but we're going to do ours. And that's where the real collision is coming. I think the danger is not necessarily that there is a full-scale return to war, because for all the sort of tub thumping, I think there is a hesitation to do that on both sides. I think the danger is it grinds on like this, and it keeps going and it keeps going. That is a huge level of brinkmanship. It'll have a massive impact on the markets. There's nothing really getting through the strait now because of the American blockade and because of the Iranian attacks. So oil is going to go up. We're going to see that in bills. And also this brinkmanship is incredibly dangerous. It has huge risk of going too far and neither side being able to contain it then.
OK, Emma, thank you very much indeed. Now, no England fan wants to get ahead of themselves, but if, and it remains a pretty big if, England can beat Argentina tomorrow night, they now know who they'll face, Spain, as you may have indeed probably almost certainly did see. First, though, there's the small matter of Messi and co. Kick-off is in less than 24 hours, and by this time tomorrow, the match may well be over. It is in the hands of the footballing gods. Captain Harry Kane says, though, they have nothing to fear.
Come on, England!
Slowly, group by group, England fans are touching down for what promises to be a monumental clash of two great rivals.
England are just going to scrape through. Harry Kane, 90+5 winner. I mean, if you take Messi out of that team, they're absolutely nothing.
And after the Mexico game, it's the biggest win that I've seen us in my lifetime. So I think it's written in the stars for me. I think we're going to do it.
David Beckham's recent visit,
a big role model for me, big inspiration,
reminded the current captain of his best England moment growing up, and it involved Argentina.
It's actually Beckham's penalty. Red kit, yellow armband, I think, and we all knew what Beckham went through previously against Argentina, and that kind of redemption story of scoring that penalty, his celebration, his pulling the shirt and his face, and yeah, that's one of my favourite England memories. Really, when you think about it, how long he's been at the top of his game and never played England. Ultimately, we know how good a player he is. We know what he's done in the game, how consistent he's been for so long. But the game is against Argentina, not against Lionel Messi. We're coming up against a great unit, a great team with fantastic players.
Harry Kane becomes England's most capped outfield player tomorrow, but the only landmark he cares about is leading his team out in the final.
We're in the semi-final of a World Cup for a reason. It might come down to small details, small margins, but yeah, we've got nothing to fear, we've got nothing to worry about. We go full gas and try and take it into the final.
Well, tomorrow is a very, very big day. Let's speak to Steve in Atlanta. Steve, there's been a lot of talk in the wake of the match against Mexico about splits in the England camp. How seriously should we take it all?
Yeah, a lot of talk, Tom, about division after those post-match interviews after the Norway game, but frankly I don't really buy into it. First of all, it's important to say I don't think there was anything really wrong with the questions that were asked, and there certainly wasn't anything wrong with the way Thomas Tuchel or Jude Bellingham answered them. I think it just gave us an indication of their characters. Both of them are real winners, and I think we should celebrate Thomas Tuchel's honesty and his passion, and we should also celebrate the way that Jude Bellingham in those interviews defended his teammates. But look, now they've got something much bigger to think about. Good news for Thomas Tuchel, he's got a full squad to choose from. That means that Declan Rice is fit after his illness. You know, it was 40 years ago that a little Argentinian genius wearing a number 10 shirt broke English hearts at a World Cup. Fans are praying that doesn't happen here again tomorrow in Messi's first, remarkably, and probably last game against England. Some good news tonight, as you reported, potential revenge time for England. If they do manage to get through to the final, they will be able to try to avenge that defeat against Spain in the Euros 2 years ago.
Fingers crossed, Steve. Thank you very much indeed. Now, many of the pundits said tonight's semi-final between France and Spain should have been the final itself. But France, the pre-tournament favourites, didn't really get going in the first half tonight and gave away a penalty in the second. They weren't really any better, as you would have seen. Spain bossed it and ended up with a well-deserved 2-0 win.
Mouth-watering. In Dallas, Texas, two neighbouring nations at the top of the world rankings facing off. In a closed-roof, air-conditioned stadium, French and Spanish fans prepared to watch their team battle for a place in the World Cup final. But the delight of fans back home. Spain! Sending fans watching in Madrid wild. Before then missing a free kick. Spain will now face either England or Argentina outside of New York City on Sunday. Vincent McAviney, News at 10.
Well, Ashna has been watching tonight's semi-final with some England fans. By the looks of things, some very wet England fans in Atlanta. Not wanting to tempt fate, Ashna, but what do they make of Spain being England's potential opponent if they can overcome Argentina tomorrow?
I think it says a lot, Tom, at the fact that when the final whistle was blown in that match, there was some cheers. I think there is a sense of anticipation. I think there is anxiousness, but maybe even a glimmer of hope. But before they get to that moment, they're going to have to face a history-defining moment for both teams. Both England and Argentina know that going into tomorrow, there is a huge sense of generational, iconic, momentous, kind of hope, I suppose, behind them going into this. We know that police in Atlanta have also been given context around the history between these two teams. In fact, the fact there are 75,000 fans descending on Atlanta tells you all you need to know. We know that this is a game where separation between the fans and the World Cup in the stands does not happen, so that will give way to some room for essentially some fruity scenes potentially. There will be friction among those rivals. Tickets, by the way, are costing some £7,000. Look, it is rare, of course, that these footballing titans will face off against each other. The last time it happened was 24 years ago. But given the fact that this is something that's full of political tension, that we have seen this increased security operation, I think fans are keen to see that this game does not have a political edge and that the biggest showdown for these two sides purely plays out on the pitch.
Ashna, thank you for braving the rain. We'll see what happens tomorrow. Thank you very much indeed. Now, you wouldn't have thought a law was needed to force state workers like the police or NHS managers to simply tell the truth in inquiries into their work, would you? But a long history of lying, for example, about how the Hillsborough Stadium disaster happened in 1989 has made it a necessity. MPs voted tonight for the so-called Hillsborough Law to stop cover-ups. It was backed by the outgoing and indeed the incoming Prime Minister. It is some comfort to the campaigning Hillsborough families.
It is the worst sporting tragedy in British history. 97 lives lost and decades fighting for justice. After a deadly crush at the 1989 FA Cup semi-final at Hillsborough Stadium, the authorities spent years wrongly blaming Liverpool fans and ignoring their own failings. Charlotte Hennessy was just 6 when her father Jimmy died.
When you have got all of the evidence there that your loved one was still alive, and you can prove that with multiple different witnesses and nobody wants to hear it, you know, it's really, really difficult and it totally consumes your life.
Since Hillsborough, victims of other scandals like the Grenfell Tower fire and infected blood have joined the campaign to prevent future cover-ups. And tonight, MPs approved a Hillsborough law forcing public officials to tell the truth.
The Hillsborough families fought so that no family like them should ever have to endure and suffer what they went through.
And in his first speech since returning to Parliament, Andy Burnham thanked the man he's about to replace.
We have had a situation in this country where people suffer the trauma of the initial bereavement, the incident that took their loved ones away. Then they are re-traumatised by the behaviour of the state. We can't take that hurt away tonight, but we can put decency back at the heart of the British state, and that is what this bill does. And I finish again by praising the Prime Minister for making it happen, and this truly is his legacy. Thank you very much.
Families and campaigners were watching on in the public gallery, including Margaret Aspinall, whose son James died at Hillsborough.
What are your reflections having witnessed that moment?
As well as it being Keir Starmer's legacy, it's also the 97 legacy as well for them. And I think I was so proud to be there today to listen to the bill getting passed in Parliament.
These Hillsborough families never gave up their campaign. And tonight they hope the change they fought for means nobody suffers like they did again. Harry Horton, News at 10.
A big moment at last. Now, in the past half an hour, new measures have been announced to extend protection from social media to 16 to 18-year-olds. On top of the ban for under 16s, there'll now be a transition stage. There'll be restricted overnight access for the 16 to 18-year group, a nighttime curfew. Features which keep users scrolling will also be switched off for that age group. The Technology Secretary, Liz Kendall, said it would avoid a cliff edge of access once they turn 16. Now, as one senior firefighter stated today, the phrase spreading like wildfire was coined for a reason, and there are still plenty burning tonight. There were 19 across bone-dry countryside in England and Wales during the day. Stronger winds are only making things worse.
As the smoke relentlessly billows from these burning Peak District moors, the earth and wildlife beneath is gradually being destroyed. The fire service and mountain rescue teams are working together to try to stop this fire at source. That's why we've got one of two helicopters here, which are effectively doing laps of this reservoir, Torside Reservoir, collecting water and taking it to the top of Tintwistle Moor to try and douse those flames. These pictures, taken almost 3 weeks ago, show the fire in its early stages, covering around 400 square metres. Now it's estimated more than 640 acres have been burned.
Yeah, it's been quite terrifying.
For those watching the fire edge nearer, it's an unwanted spectacle. Phil helps to run this water sports club at the bottom of the hill.
We are keeping close eye on the wind direction. Yeah, there is a concern. There's lots of flammable material around here. It's very dry.
The smoke prompted an early school pickup for parents, the dry heat showing no sign of abating.
I think it is a good decision because you can't keep 30 children locked up in a classroom with closed windows.
3 miles away, firefighters remain at Duston Reservoir 3 days after videos on social media appeared to show fireworks being lit in the area. Today, a 20-year-old woman's been charged with offences including aggravated arson.
The ground is tinder dry, so it is spreading. We've got high temperatures which have been maintained throughout the rest of the week.
Elsewhere, the flames have come and gone. This stretch of Western Nature Reserve in Southampton is now a charred wasteland. But with no rain on the horizon, places like the Peak District remain at risk. Authorities urging visitors not to add to a workload that's already weighing heavily. Jonathan Brown, News at 10.
Pay for some of the biggest names on the BBC keeps going up, while the number paying the licence fee keeps going down. 500,000 fewer last year. After Gary Lineker's dismissal from Match of the Day, another controversial name tops the list. Radio presenter Scott Mills doubled his salary when he took over the Radio 2 breakfast show. He got almost £750,000 before he was sacked. In March, in second place, is the host of the Radio 1 breakfast show, Greg James, who got £440,000. Now, finally, many millions of pounds for a skeleton that is many millions of years old. Gus, the T-Rex, who strode the Earth of 67 million years ago, broke the auction record for a dinosaur fossil today. He was snapped up for $50 million by an as-yet secret buyer who paleontologists hope can be persuaded to put Gus on public display.
Piece by meticulous piece of bone has been dug out of the dusty earth of South Dakota and put back together. Meet Gus, the nearly complete skeleton of a T-Rex, as incredible in its rarity as it is its size. 38 feet long and more than 12 feet tall. He's been named after the man whose ranch he was found on by 2 fossil hunters.
We'd gotten in the habit of kind of checking weirder areas that a lot of people just miss.
Saw the metatarsal poking out of the ground.
Walking up the hill to it, it was clear we had some really large bones.
By his reaction, I could tell it was going to be a special one.
Sold, $43 million.
So special, he's just been sold at auction for, including the fees, more than $50 million. Who could afford such a price tag is still a mystery. But could it be one of Hollywood's fossil collectors, like Nicolas Cage, who bought a dinosaur skull similar to this one for 6 figures, but had to return it home after it was found to have been smuggled out of Mongolia? Or Leonardo DiCaprio, who loves prehistoric artefacts and actually sold this skull to Russell Crowe.
You were drinking at Leonardo's house. You guys were having a fun night.
Yeah, well, he was pretty cool about it. He said, just give me what I paid for it. And I think he paid like 30 or 35 grand or something.
For many of us, T-Rexes are only seen in films, and with multi-million-dollar auctions becoming the norm, some scientists are concerned about their skeletons disappearing from public view into private collections.
If it doesn't go on display, then, you know, who gets to see it? And it's not just the scientific value we have to think about, but it's also comes back to that idea of, of wonder and awe. One of the reasons these things make so much money is because people think they're awesome, right? They really do. And you just think, that kind of wonder, you want to share it. Surely.
It's taken millions of years for this magnificent predator to be unearthed. And this may be all we'll see of Gus if he disappears again for only a few to see. Ellie Pitt, News at 10.
That's it. Susanna and Ed are back from 6 with Good Morning Britain. Good night. Thanks for watching.